I am Pastor Darryl, and I'm here really with you each week to introduce the yearly Bible reading. Remember what the Apostle Paul said in his last will and testimony in 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself a workman who need not be ashamed of himself, but rightly dividing the word of truth. And so at the beginning of each week, I'm just going to introduce the particular passages you'll be reading. And we begin this new year of Bible reading in the book of beginnings. As a matter of fact, that's the Greek word where we get the word Genesis. Genesis, the book of Genesis, it's the book of beginnings or the origin of everything. As a matter of fact, in these first 11 chapters, it really is the beginning of the human race, the beginning of everything. And we're going to find that in these verses that you're going to be reading in these first 11 chapters, that is, it's going to be about the beginning of the universe, of man, of the Sabbath, of marriage, of sin, of sacrifice, of salvation, of family, civilization, of government, and of nations. So now, as you in this first session this week, you'll be looking and reading through the first 5 chapters. And so with that in mind, here's what I want you to be looking for. First of all, as we begin the scriptures, it begins in the very first verse with the summary statement, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what you're going to find is the way that Moses had put this together, that there is an ending summary statement in chapter 2, verse 4. And this is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth. So between these two verses, you have this account of God creating everything. And what you're going to notice is that God first creates the provision for life before he creates life. And he creates an environment. And he knows he'll talk about the sun and the moon as a greater light, a lesser light. Well, because in these days, they're worshiping the sun and the moon as gods. And the writer wants to make sure we understand, no, this is the light, the greater light, the lesser light. These are not gods. Now, the question is, if God's going to create everything, how is he going to actually do this, what he says he's doing here in chapter 1 in these 6 days? Or the amount of time that God chooses to use. Well, the psalmist tells us in Psalm 33, verses 6 to 9, that God literally spoke everything into existence. It's like he spoke into the darkness, and then everything came into being. And so because he spoke it into creation, that means this isn't measurable, this isn't repeatable, so we are outside the realm of science. This is revelation. And so we're going to read that God creates the first man. And so does he in the way that he creates man in his own image. In verse 27 of chapter 1, he'll say, God created both man, male and female, in his own image, which means God created human beings, unlike the rest of the creation you're going to read about, with a capacity to be able to reflect their creator. And that's why we can actually glorify God and show his nature and reflect what our creator is like. No other animal, even the Bible doesn't say angels bear the image of God. You're going to see a change in God's name in chapter 1 from Elohim, translated God, as creator, to in the chapter 2, he's going to become Yahweh, which we translate the word Lord, where Elohim is the fact of he's the creator of all things. But when you get to chapter 2, you're going to find out that he's Yahweh because that's his covenant name. In other words, he wants a relationship with the very ones that he has created. And then we're going to find that when we get to chapter 3, there's going to be the fall. Relationships are based on trust and respect. And at this point, trust is broken. And man, primarily Adam, breaks trust with God. And the result will be separation from the Creator. And the consequences of this separation are seen really quickly with the hatred of one brother for the other, because you see Cain's going to be killing Abel. And yet in God's grace, he will, you'll read, permit a third son to be born, Seth. And he's going to begin a godly line. And we'll see these line of generations. One line is going to be honoring God as their creator. But then that line is going to merge with the line of Canaan, who killed his brother. And then there's going to be basically a corruption. And because God's a holy God, you're going to see that God's going to have to deal with it. And so God will bring judgment in this world by a flood that's going to destroy all the life of the rebellious. Yet even with that, there is one, Noah, who's still faithful to honor God as his creator and reflect God because he's created in God's image. And so God's going to provide a way to deliver him and his entire family. In the same way, God would later use his son, Jesus Christ, to be the provision for the deliverance of his judgment on all sin of the world. So here he's going to provide an ark. He's going to instruct Noah how to build something that's never been built. It's never even rained yet. And by faith, Noah's going to build this ark, which will be the provision for Noah and his family's salvation. That's the first 5 chapters. And you're going to have a great week digging deep into this. So remember, study to show thyself a workman who need not be ashamed of themselves, rightly dividing the word of truth. We'll see you next week.